A simpler time. It was 1973, and I was a 12-year-old kid living in small-town USA. It was middle-class suburbia. Our house was a normal house, on a normal street, like a million other houses on a million other streets in this country. There was nothing special about us or where we lived. Ever since I could remember, we had young men fighting and dying in a place called Vietnam, or wherever the heck that was. I remember spending my childhood hoping that I wouldn't have to go there someday. The hardness of that time touched us personally. My mother had a coworker who, along with her son, lived in the city some 5 miles away. We knew them as they visited often for Sunday dinner or for family movie night. When the son enlisted in the Marine Corps, he had a 1968 Plymouth Roadrunner that he purchased new. We just thought he was the coolest thing ever when he came screaming up in that car. He had no place to keep the car while away at war. My dad, being a Marine himself, offered to keep the car in our second garage bay. He even moved our boat out onto the side yard to make room for it. He reasoned that if this young man was putting himself in harm's way for his country, the least we could do was support him here at home by housing his prized possessions safely. Well, he never did return from Vietnam, and that car sat in our garage for 3 years after his death. His mom couldn't bear to even look at that car. One evening, 2 years after his death, I heard my mom and dad talking about it. They had wanted to recover the garage bay, and my mom wanted to tell her friend that she had to do something with the car. My dad told her that they would not approach her, that they would just hold the car and give her whatever time she needed to deal with it. A year later, she approached my mom and dad and asked my dad to sell the car and keep whatever he received for it in payment for tying up the garage for so long. My dad had a young man at his work that was into muscle cars and ecstatic to get the chance to purchase it at what both parties agreed to be a fair price. My dad put the cash in a card and mailed it to Mom's friend. It was a sympathy card, and Dad wrote in it, "In loving memory of your Marine who paid the ultimate price for his country. Please accept this small token of this nation's appreciation." He mailed it to her unsigned. Before he sold the car, he had the fallen soldier's name stenciled in 1-inch letters on the back of the trunk near the keyhole. It said, "In loving memory of a fallen Marine," with his name and his unit insignia and the dates that he served. He explained the whole story of how he came to have the car to the young man who was buying it. He thought it was a fitting tribute and agreed to keep the memorial on the car as long as he owned it. It sits in his garage today, one of his many fine automobiles in a large collection. He drives it in the Memorial Day Parade every year, and my dad still salutes it as it drives by. Well, things in Southeast Asia were winding down for American troops, and, well, I didn't realize it at the time, but I would never have to go there. Today I thank God for that. My friends and I had the run of the neighborhood, which at our age extended just 1 block out around my house. The street I lived on was a road that led into and out of the neighborhood, so traffic was a little steadier in front of my house. Now, if I walked out through my backyard and down a path between 2 neighbors who lived on the street below, I came out on Pleasant Street, right across from the home of my best childhood friend. There was virtually no traffic on Pleasant Street except for the people who lived there on that 1 block and the mailman. And in the summer, the ice cream man would make his daily run through as well. The street was our playground. There was a vacant lot on that block, and it hosted all of our baseball and football games as well as just about any other activity we engaged in. It led up a hill to the backyard of my next-door neighbor, and this topography lended itself perfectly for sledding in the winter. When we got a little older, we would flood Pleasant Street in front of the field in the winter. This caused freezing, allowed us to sled from my neighbor's backyard down the hill, onto and across Pleasant Street. and into another trail that went between two houses and came out in the backyard of a house on the next street below Pleasant Street. We got away with that for a while, till old man Nelson backed out of his driveway one day onto the icy spot, slid clear off the road into the trailhead, getting himself hopelessly stuck in the snow. My friend Jimmy Lewis's parents received a call from old man Nelson, who then contacted my parents, and that was the end of the glorious flooding of Pleasant Street. In 1973, that block on the map was our entire world. Suburbia was still being built, and there were wooded areas in which to explore, and there was even a brook to play in that ran between two houses. If we walked through the side yard of one of our neighborhood companions' house, we would be in a wooded no man's land that the brook ran through. As we stood on the bank looking down into the brook, it was approximately a 15-foot drop, practically the Grand Canyon to an 11 or 12-year-old kid. We climbed a tree and tied a rope and put a pipe through it on the other end. We used it to get a running start and swing out over that canyon, landing safely on the other side. Until one day when one of our crew launched himself off the cliff and the rope broke, we had to deliver him home with a broken collarbone. Of course, in those days, there was never a threat of a lawsuit. Our parents all just instantly agreed that the only blame for this tragedy was the collective recklessness of all their children. To make sure it didn't happen again, though, our dads got together and went out and cut the swing down. The Grand Canyon swing adventure was over. Back then, of course, if you were 12, you were still a child. There was no internet or electronic video gaming to rob you of the innocence of your youth. We woke up early in the morning, grabbed breakfast at the insistence of our mothers, ran out the door, only to return briefly for lunch, and at the sound of my dad yelling for me at dinner time. Back then, our dads would just step out onto the back porch and yell our names as loud as they could. This was our summoning home. My dad was a Marine when he was younger, and he had really superb yelling skills. If I didn't venture past my boundary lines, it was sure that I would always hear him. And if I did venture past those lines, I could usually still hear him. I would just have to run a little faster to get home. I certainly never wanted him to have to call me twice. After dinner, we were dismissed to go back out until dark, a little later if it was summer. In the summer, we usually ate dinner at a picnic table on the deck outside our house. Nobody was excused until the last person finished eating. I would start to hear the sounds of my friends coming out on Pleasant Street below and get anxious to go. My younger brother took forever to eat. Sometimes when Mom was clearing the table and Dad had his face in the newspaper, I would steal the food off his plate and give it to the dog so I can get out of there quicker. The dog always sat near me at those summertime dinners, and everyone just thought that old dog just loved me so much. In reality, he just knew that sitting by me was his best shot at getting some extra food. Those were simpler days. Great days to be a kid. Batman was the only one we knew that had a computer. ISIS was just a TV show about a female superhero. Police officers were not being shot randomly as they sat in their cruisers. Crazy people did not go into schools and churches and senselessly murder innocent people. And people of all ages accepted the choice of the nation when it came time to elect a president, without feeling the need to protest and riot in our streets. We roamed the neighborhood like kings. We terrorized my younger brother, who in turn, along with his friends, terrorized us. We fought on Saturday morning, were best friends again Saturday afternoon. We went to church on Sunday, and either back to work or school on Monday morning. The mailman was a trusted friend, and the ice cream man an anticipated visitor. Yes, our house in our neighborhood was like a million other houses in a million other neighborhoods, but it was our world, the epicenter of our childhood lives. We were safe there. We were home. Some say you can never go home again, and as I look around at the world today and back at that innocent world of my childhood, I believe that to be true.